Welcome to this deep dive. Today we're looking closely at well, how doctors can better understand and support patients navigating neurodiversity.
hmm
And our inspiration actually comes from actress Lake Bell's experiences. You brought her new book, All About Brains, to our attention.
That's right. It seemed like really valuable material, offering some perspectives that felt quite relevant.
Absolutely. So our goal today is to kind of extract the key insights
Yeah,
from her story and the book, particularly, how they connect to our work supporting individuals with different brain types.
exactly. You've given us a really compelling set of sources here. It lets us connect Lake Bell's very personal journey with the, let's say, broader medical understanding of neurodiversity.
Right.
We want to explore her experiences, see how they might inform our approaches to care, maybe patient support.
Yeah, and just for context, that term neurodiversity,
hmm
it's essentially the idea that neurological differences, things like autism, ADHD, dyslexia, epilepsy, they're just natural variations in how human brains are wired.
Not necessarily deficits, more like variations.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And Lake Bell, many know her as an actress, but she's now an author too, driven really by her own lifelong experience with dyslexia
hmm
and also the neurodivergent experiences within her own family, her kids' learning differences, her daughter's epilepsy.
It's quite a collection of experiences in one family.
It is. So we're going to delve into that story and pull out the messages that seem most relevant for us, perhaps as professionals thinking about these things.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Maybe start with how her personal experiences were a catalyst.
Absolutely. It seems they really were. She talks quite vividly about feeling less than because of her dyslexia, especially, comparing herself to her mother, who is apparently a very fast reader.
Right.
She even mentions being put in slow learning classes.
Wow.
And when you hear that, even in our practices today, we sometimes see let's call it the residual impact of those kinds of early experiences.
I mean, like the internalized stuff.
Exactly. The internalized struggles, the labels, they can unfortunately stick around and sometimes even make people hesitant to seek support later on.
That makes sense. And it wasn't just her own past, right? She also described this feeling of otherness after her daughter Nova was diagnosed with epilepsy.
Yeah, that was striking. She said people became really scared to interact with Nova.
It's amazing how a medical condition, especially something involving the brain, can create such a social barrier.
She mentioned Nova had her first seizure at 2, a fever seizure, which can happen.
Okay.
But then the actual epilepsy diagnosis came later, at 5, after a seizure without a fever.
Right. And as doctors, we do see how isolating these experiences can be for families. You, having shared this source, probably recognize those challenges too.
Oh, absolutely.
It really highlights how crucial it is for us not just to manage the medical side, but also to support the social and emotional well-being.
That's such a key point because the fear and, frankly, the lack of understanding from the wider community can sometimes be just as tough, maybe even tougher than the condition itself.
Yeah.
Bell's observation really just underscores this ongoing need for, more public awareness, more education about neurodiversity,
We need environments where people feel comfortable, informed.
not fearful.
Yeah.
Right. And she also mentions her son, Ozzy, having a few learning differences. Which just adds to this picture, doesn't it? The diverse neurological landscape right within her own home. It emphasizes that neurodiversity isn't one thing, it's a whole spectrum.
It really is a spectrum.
Yeah.
And thinking about why you sent this, you probably see how these personal journeys shape not just how someone sees themselves, but also how families approach seeking support, advocating for their kids.
Precisely. These lived experiences, they give us invaluable context. It complements our clinical knowledge.
Oh,
They remind us that behind every diagnosis, there's a unique human story. Challenges, yes, but also strengths, different ways of navigating the world.
So moving on a bit, Bell also talked about the stigma she encountered. She recalled people basically thinking, you're not as smart, you're just not.
Ugh.
It's pretty disheartening to think how those outdated ideas could impact a kid's self-worth.
Sadly, that stigma, maybe it's less overt now in some places, but it still casts a shadow, doesn't it?
I think so.
We definitely still see patients, families who've internalized those negative messages over years. Her memory just highlights the long road we still have in really destigmatizing these conditions.
And that stigma must affect whether people even seek help or stick with treatment plans.
Oh, absolutely. It can be a huge barrier.
And then she hit on the resources,
Yeah.
or lack thereof.
Mm.
Finding them either too simplistic. She mentioned this bunny's different from the other bunnies kind of thing.
Right. Patronizing almost.
Yeah, or the opposite way, too academic. Even for serious things like epilepsy, just using big, fancy words of epilepsy and seizures. It sounds like she just wanted something straightforward, age-appropriate, that could help her daughter understand without being talked down to or totally overwhelmed.
And this is such a crucial observation. It aligns perfectly with the challenges we often face in patient education, doesn't it?
It really does.
Finding that sweet spot, accurate, comprehensive info, but delivered accessibly, understandably for both kids and parents, it's an ongoing effort.
Definitely.
We need more resources that bridge that gap effectively between the oversimplistic and the, impenetrable medical jargon. For anyone interacting with patients, this just highlights how much our language matters and what resources we point people towards.
So what's the takeaway here for our work? It feels like she's pointing to a real disconnect between the lived reality of neurodiversity and the support that's easily available.
I think that's exactly right. And it just reinforces how vital, clear, empathetic communication is from us as healthcare professionals.
Yeah.
We have to be mindful of the words we choose, make sure our explanations actually land, build that understanding, build that trust.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting and probably something that caught your eye too. Bell actively reframes these neurological differences, not as problems, but as a superpower.
Yes. It's a powerful shift, a really important one.
It feels like it.
And it's a perspective that is, thankfully, gaining more traction, more recognition, even within the medical community. We are slowly moving away from only focusing on challenges and labels toward understanding and, celebrating the unique strengths and talents that often come with neurodivergent conditions.
So for someone listening, maybe interacting with patients, this means understanding neurodiversity isn't just about difficulties.
Exactly. It's also about potentially recognizing, maybe even unlocking unique cognitive abilities, skills that could be incredibly valuable in life, in work.
She explicitly connects neurodiversity and creativity. Says different ways of thinking aren't just valuable, they're essential. They stop the world being boring.
And what's fascinating is there's growing research that actually supports this. Different cognitive styles really can foster innovation, creative problem solving.
Like how?
Well, for example, individuals with dyslexia might excel in visual spatial reasoning, or someone with ADHD might demonstrate incredible hyper-focus and creativity when they're really engaged in something.
Okay.
These aren't just nice anecdotes anymore. There's increasing evidence pointing to these links.
So, thinking about our role as doctors, how does recognizing these potential strengths change how we approach patient care?
Well, it encourages us to take a more holistic view.
Right.
It means our focus shouldn't just be on managing challenges, but also on helping individuals and their families see and cultivate and use their strengths.
Right, empowering them.
Exactly. Empowering them not just to cope with differences, but maybe even to thrive because of them. I remember this one young patient with dyslexia, terrible struggles with reading, but just an exceptional ability to visualize complex mechanical systems, recognizing that strength early helped guide him towards engineering, where that visual thinking became a huge asset. It really underlines Bell's point.
That's a great example, moving from deficit-based to strengths-based.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about her book itself, all about brains. The main inspiration, she says, was her daughter Nova, and specifically Nova's way of talking about her epilepsy, calling seizures sparkles.
It's lovely, isn't it? She even connected it to Nova's name being celestial and planetary, calls Nova a sparkler.
It's such a beautiful, positive image, especially for a child dealing with something potentially scary.
It really is, and it just perfectly illustrates the power of language, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How it shapes a child's understanding, their acceptance of their own condition.
Yeah.
By using sparkles, Nova made it less frightening, more relatable, for herself, for her family, maybe even for her friends. That kind of child-centered language can make a huge difference in reducing anxiety, fostering normalcy.
And that seems to be the core goal of the book then, to normalize talking about different brain types.
Just like we talk about different hair colors, skin types, body shapes.
Yeah. Making it clear that neurological diversity is just another natural part of human variation.
Exactly. And if you connect that to our work, that kind of normalization, starting early, it can have such a profound, lasting impact. Reducing stigma, fostering a more inclusive society.
It's about teaching kids, and maybe adults too, that differences aren't deficits, not something to hide.
Just variations in how our brains work, how we experience things. Simple as that, ideally.
She also apparently made a point of putting relatable stuff in the book, like fart jokes.
Yes.
To make it engaging help kids and parents feel less isolated.
Yeah.
Which seems smart, actually.
Oh, absolutely. Humor can be incredibly powerful for destigmatizing difficult topics.
Yeah.
Injecting some levity makes the whole thing less intimidating, more accessible, especially helpful if families are feeling overwhelmed or, alone. Makes it feel more human, less clinical.
So her bigger aim, she says, is fostering acceptance in all neurodiverse brains in a neurotypical world, and pushing for neurodiversity to be included in education systems.
Which is crucial.
From our perspective as doctors, how important is that normalization, that accessible language, in helping patients and families cope?
Oh, it's fundamental. Absolutely fundamental. When we as professionals use clear language and when society generally embraces normalizing neurodiversity, we empower patients, we empower families.
To understand their conditions.
Yes, to understand, to ask informed questions without feeling intimidated, to actively participate in their own care. It also massively reduces that shame or isolation that often comes with a diagnosis.
Right. Encouraging people to get the support they need, connect with others.
Exactly. And getting this into schools from a young age, vital for fostering empathy, acceptance, creating a more supportive world for neurodivergent people throughout their lives.
Okay, finally, she makes this really powerful point, one I think is particularly relevant for us. She says, you don't need a diagnosis yourself to empathize with the challenges of neurodiversity.
A call for empathy from everyone.
Yeah. She highlights how important it is for those without direct experience to take the time, make the effort to learn and understand.
And she emphasizes our role, potentially, in giving parents a bit of a roadmap and some language.
Right, practical tools.
To discuss these topics effectively with their kids, within their families. Considering our job is often helping people navigate really complex health stuff, how does her perspective highlight the need for broader societal understanding?
That's the question, isn't it?
It powerfully reinforces that our responsibility goes beyond just diagnosis and treatment plans.
Yeah.
Right? We also have a role, maybe an obligation, to advocate for greater societal understanding, greater empathy.
How do we do that?
By providing clear, accessible information ourselves, by modeling inclusive language, by fostering open, honest conversations whenever we can help bridge that gap between lived experience and, well, everyone else.
That point about the roadmap and language for parents feels particularly key.
It really does. It speaks directly to the need for practical, actionable support, something beyond just the medical facts that empowers families to navigate these things with more confidence, more understanding.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, it feels like we've gained some really valuable perspectives from Lake Bell's journey and her mission with All About Brains.
Definitely.
Her experiences really highlight the ongoing challenges, the stigma, the need for better resources that are relatable, accessible, hopeful even.
But also, maybe most importantly, her reframing of neurological differences, not as deficits, but as potential strengths.
Yes, that superpower idea, urging all of us, really professionals and society, toward more understanding, acceptance, genuine inclusion.
Exactly. And her focus on open conversations, positive language, changing the societal perspective, it mirrors our own goals as doctors, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Empowering patients and families.
Yeah.
By really understanding and embracing the richness of neurodiversity, we can hopefully create a more supportive, inclusive, and just a more human world for everyone.
Hopefully this discussion has given you, listening in, a clearer, maybe more nuanced understanding of these crucial issues. The power of reframing how we think about different brain types, much like we as doctors try to empower our patients with knowledge, support, and hope. Lake Bell's journey really does make you think, though. Where else, in what other areas of health and well-being can we learn from these deeply personal stories? Where else can we strive to create more inclusive, more understanding environments?
What if we really did make an effort to look for and, celebrate the unique sparkles in everyone's differences?
Something to consider.